Kevin.
Thank you, Pat. And I too want to echo Darren. Thank you for all that you do for our communities. And it's really our turn to support you and your business and all the associates that are working for you. I personally really very much enjoy your food too. So it's our turn to support you through this pandemic. So get out there and buy some good food from local businesses. All right. Well, I have the great honor and privilege of introducing former Justice Alan Page. And I had, and I see, so Alan, welcome.
Thank you.
About 5 years ago, I had the honor of introducing Justice Page before the Minnesota School Boards Association annual meeting at the convention center in Minneapolis, and we had a few minutes to sit behind the stage and chat. And he was wearing a bow tie, and so I was like, "Wow, I've never worn one of those in my entire life. Is it hard to tie them?" And no, he said it's quite easy once you get the hang of it. Not a big deal. And so, in honor of today, I figured I'd put one on.
And I don't have one, right?
Well, we'll just go off of this one. And to be clear, there are these, and I'll get to this later, but there's some great bow ties available for purchase on the Page Education Foundation store, the purple ones. So anyway, we'll just get right into this. I'm going to do a introduction, and then we'll do some questions here. And if for the people in the audience, if you have some questions that you want to pose, we really are working on the education theme today. And if you have some questions you want to pose in that area, put them into the chat, and John Shannon will collect those, and we'll see if we can answer some of those at the end. So I'm going to start with a fun fact. And I had the great pleasure of reading All Rise, which is a book, a biography of Alan Page. So I've done a little work on this. But this fun fact, Alan Page from Canton, Ohio, was on the construction team that helped to build the Football Hall of Fame. Little did he know at the time when he was pushing a broom that later he would be enshrined in this very building. To me, it's just absolutely, it gives me goosebumps when I read that. So after leaving Canton, Ohio, he was drafted and accepted to go to Notre Dame, and played there for 4 years. And then in 1967, as many of you know, he was drafted by the Minnesota Vikings. He is one of only 2 defensive players to win the NFL MVP award, and of course, was one of the legendary Purple People Eaters. So he did that, and that was kind of a means to the end. And during his days as playing football, towards the end of his football career, he enrolled in the U of M Law School, and he was still playing football. And but he has another story about Willie Mitchell. We'll get to that in a second. So he graduated in 1978 with a law degree from the University of Minnesota Law School. In 1979 through 1984, he joined the law firm of Lindquist and Venom. In 1985, was appointed Special Assistant Attorney General. In 1988, when he was enshrined in the Football Hall of Fame, he and his late wife Diane began the Page Education Foundation. And at his induction, he actually spoke of this and what they were planning on doing. In 1992, he was elected to the Minnesota Supreme Court. He was reelected in 1998, 2004, 2010, and then reached mandatory retirement age in 2015. In 2018, Justice Page was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Alan Page lives in Minneapolis and has 4 children. And as I talked about earlier, if you're interested in all the facets of Justice Page with some football thrown in, the book All Rise is available for purchase on the Page Education Foundation website. So, all right, with that introduction, I think what we would do is start, if education is our focus, start with your own experience as a student. And so my first question here is, how did Brown versus the Board of Education change your life when you were 8 years old?
Well, not many of us, I suspect, who are at this meeting today were around back in 1954. But those of us who were will recall that large portions of this country were subject to state-sponsored segregation, and both in our schools, but in virtually every other aspect of life. And I was 8 years old when Brown was decided. And I can remember sitting and reading the Canton Repository and the Cleveland Plain Dealer, reading stories about Brown. And what I took from those stories, not so much that I really understood everything, but I understood that the law and the power of law could change things dramatically. I mean, being a young African-American male back in 1954, you knew where your place was. You knew that merely because of the color of your skin, there were people who thought you were the other, less than, not qualified, not capable. And Brown sounded the death knell for state-sponsored segregation. And it made clear that we should not, we as a country, we had to move away from this notion that race and skin color somehow made some of us less than. I was lucky. I had grown up. I grew up in a family in which my parents valued education, made sure that I understood that, made sure that I understood that I had to be a good citizen, and that education could be a tool that I could use to make my life better than it might otherwise be. So I was fortunate.
Thank you. And you're right, many of us were not around then, and I can't even fathom how much of a milestone that was. I'd like to, you also speak of kind of, you knew fairly early on, or at least you had a hunch of what maybe you wanted to do as far as a career besides the football piece, but because of this court case and some other thinking about what you wanted to do in your life.
Yeah, I probably watched a little too much Perry Mason as a child. I'd heard stories about how lawyers made lots of money, didn't work too hard, drove big fancy cars and owned big houses. And, for me growing up in Canton, if things, the prospects for somebody like me growing up in Canton were that if things went well, I might be able to find a job in a steel mill. Well, not that there's anything wrong with working in steel mills, but intuitively I understood that the work was dirty, it was dangerous, and it was repetitious. And those are three things that I've never been very good at. And so at that age, when people would ask me what I wanted to do, I would say I wanted to be a lawyer. And I can't tell you how important Brown is in that. Because it gave me the sense of hope that if segregation could be ended in schools, it could be ended everywhere. Hope that at some point we might be able to achieve equality of opportunity, that equal justice under the law isn't just mere words, that it has meaning, real meaning. And that's something that has stuck with me from very early on.
So also in the book, there's an interesting kind of a funny account. Maybe it wasn't funny at the time, but there is something about perseverance and persistence. And so you enrolled in Willie Mitchell Law School to start out, I believe, and you had some funny comments about that experience.
Well, they weren't funny at the time. They're, in retrospect, it's easy to laugh at them. I enrolled at William Mitchell back in the fall of 1968. After my first season with the Vikings, it was the start of my second season. And, they give you this advanced assignment for the first day of class. And it was, I don't know, 400 or 500 pages of reading, and who's ever done that in advance of class? Well, I read as much of it as I could. I show up at the class the first day, and I had no clue what was going on, no clue what the professor was talking about. And I thought, I must be the dummy in this class. After 2 or 3 more classes, the first week, it became clear to me that I wasn't going to survive. And because I was in over my head, but I was so far in over my head that I couldn't even figure out how to drop out. That's how bad it was. What I didn't realize is that I wasn't the only one that felt like they were in over their heads. That's just the way law school is. It's a different way of, they're teaching you a different way of thinking, and there's a different way of teaching. And it was totally new to me. And I thought it was either sink or swim. And I didn't know how to swim, so I dropped out. But fortunately, back in 1975, I decided to go back to law school, this time committed to being successful, committed to learning the law and learning what the law was about and how you could use the law to help people and solve problems. Because for me, that's what it's all about. And so went back to enroll at the University of Minnesota in the summer of 1975. Actually took my first 2 law school classes at the University of Texas down in Austin, Texas in the summer of 1975. And absolutely fell in love with the law, the process, the whole thing.
Well, on behalf of the state of Minnesota, thank you for persevering. Yes, thank you. So can you talk a bit about your amazing career trajectory and how you see yourself as the common man, that maybe to that power that we each have within us?
Well, you know, I don't see myself anything more than the common man. I look at the world around me and try to do the things that I can to make it better. I think I've come to the conclusion after all these years that um, it's really about how we make the world a better place. Um, and each of us has that power. We can all do it in some ways, maybe big or small. Some may have um, more opportunities than others, but we all have that power within ourselves. And the real question is not whether we have the ability or the power, but the question is whether we are going to utilize that power, whether we're going to act. And I've always had this, and don't ask me where it comes from, because I don't know that when I was a child anybody would have identified this characteristic, but I've always had this certainly since my adult life, had this sense of take advantage of the opportunities that are available. Put yourself in position to have opportunities and then take advantage of the ones that are available and do what you can, not only for yourself, as Kevin Warren, the former CEO of the Vikings would say, you know, when you've taken the elevator to the top, make sure you send the elevator back down. Don't just get off the elevator and let the elevator take care of itself. Send it back down to help others.
Thank you. Thank you. So next I want to highlight the work you and Diane started in 1988 with the Page Foundation, Education Foundation. And so after 33 years, $16 million in Page grants have been awarded to 7,700 Page scholars. Page scholars have given nearly 500,000 hours of volunteer service to communities across the state of Minnesota, impacting the lives of 50,000 children. I did a little digging on this and found our closest college is Century College. And so did a little checking on that and found out that there are currently students at Century College that are Page scholars. And
absolutely.
The answer is there are currently 8. So thank you for that work, benefiting the students all around the state of Minnesota. So can you tell us how you had the idea? What was the impetus that you and Diane had around starting that?
Well, you know, it really begins long before we started the foundation. I met Diane in 1971 in the lobby of General Mills, and when I was introduced to her, she mentioned that she was volunteering at a boys' club, and would I be willing to come visit the kids at the club with her? And I did. Never anticipating that one day we might be married, that we might fall in love and be married, but also never anticipating the opportunities that we would have to change the world, to change the future. She had been volunteering. I'd been volunteering in schools, speaking to kids. I do that, have done that since almost since from the time I started playing football, even though at the time I was a bit of a kid myself. But over time, and given my focus on education and the speaking that I had done on that subject, we thought, you know, at some point we have to actually do something. And when we found out that I was going to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, we thought, what better opportunity than to use that occasion as a vehicle to actually take concrete steps to begin to help people change their lives. And so literally the day we found out, the next day we sat down with some friends and thought about what we could do. And we came up with the idea of an education foundation. And we came back and told our 4 children about it, and they all said, well, that's great. Except for our number 2 daughter said, that's great, but it seems like you could do more than just give scholarships. And this was, again, 1988, long before mentoring was the buzzword that it is today. And she did some research and said, if you added a mentoring component to what you do, a service component, you could really have a far greater impact. And interestingly, that she intuitively knew that. Here Diane and I were thinking, we'll use my celebrity, if you will, to influence young people. Well, the reality is that one person can only reach so many people. How do we magnify that? Well, we magnify it by having our paid scholars receive financial assistance to go to school. But also we require them in return to work with young children, kindergarten through 8th grade, specifically in the area of education, while they're going to school. They do 50 hours an academic year. And so that the young children that they work with have the opportunity to see somebody who looks like them, maybe comes from their neighborhood, maybe has some shared experience, some shared background, using education as that tool to achieve hopes and dreams. They see somebody who cares about them and shows up in their lives. And it's just been phenomenal. We couldn't have asked for anything more than the work that our scholars do. We're and are fortunate enough to facilitate the work that our scholars do, but it's our scholars who really are making the difference, because they send a strong, clear message to those young children that yes, education is a tool that you can use. A lot of what we see in schools and in our justice system when it comes to young children is based on a lack of hope. And the foundation's model is creating heroes through education and service. And I would add, we're creating hope through education and service.
It's absolutely just a wonderful, from reading about it, it just is a wonderful concept. And I think your daughter, that was a great addition to the thinking on that. So in 2017, Ramsey Middle School was renamed Justice Page. And also a piece also on that is we're kind of looking to have you address how that came to be, because it's kind of an interesting story there. But also wanted to just let the audience know that October 30th, 2020, the North St. Paul Maplewood Oakdale School District announced a new elementary school to be built in their district, and it will be named the Justice Allen Page Elementary School, and it's scheduled to open in 2022. But could you talk about the first school in Minneapolis that took that on?
Sure. I would just note that I was, this past Sunday, I visited Justice Allen Page Elementary in Maplewood. And it's starting to look like it's a real place. So that was kind of exciting. Justice Page Middle School, started with a group of students at what was then Ramsey Middle School, named after former Governor Alexander Ramsey. A group of the students there felt that the things that Ramsey did while he was governor and through his life didn't represent who they are. And they wanted the school's name changed. They mounted a campaign that was student driven. They had to learn the process for changing names, not something that schools do very often. They had to raise money. They had to work with the school board and the superintendent. They had to convince parents to go along, and they were able to do it. A very powerful message from those young children about what you can do when you act, when you have a cause, and when you're willing to put in the time, the energy, and the effort to make change happen. What I love about the name the name change, they contacted me when they got down to 5 finalists and asked if I would be willing to allow them to put my name forward. And I was thrilled, but also shocked. I mean, who has a school named after them? And there were 4 other people whose names were included. And I'm looking at the list of names and I'm thinking, fat chance it's going to be me. Well, it turns out they selected me. And what is interesting about what they did is they didn't name the school Allen Page Middle School. They named it Justice Page Middle School, because at the core of what those young people were trying to get at was justice. And that, every time I think about it, it sends chills up my spine.
Well, you mentioned that somebody, I think a professor at the University of Minnesota Law School, mentioned to you at one point, never whisper justice.
Never whisper justice.
And when I saw that, it just gave me absolute goosebumps. Just perfect. And so thank you for that. Okay. Well, one little editorial comment here, but I went to Ramsey Junior High, which is now Ramsey Middle School in St. Paul. And maybe the students over in the Minneapolis Justice Page School could give a nudge to the students over in St. Paul and see what we could do there. Okay, so next question is more recent. And actually was the reason why the White Bear Rotary Club was really the kind of the impetus, the catalyst for the White Bear Rotary Club starting to work on equity and inclusion in our club. And so this, in late May, George Floyd was killed. And I know you live relatively close. You live actually really close to my father over in Kenwood area. And what was your reaction to that would be my first question. And then secondarily, do you think that this event or some of the other unfortunate events of recent will cause a substantive societal change? Do you think that this will be that thing that really finally gets us to move on equity?
My reaction to it was, what just what a awful thing to have happened, an awful way to die, an awful way for a person to die, and for no reason, for absolutely no reason. Didn't have to happen. Shouldn't have happened. The question that it raises, though, and that you raise, is, given that it did happen, will it result in substantive change? And I think the jury's still out on that. It's not clear to me that this won't be another event like the beating of Rodney King, the riots sparked by any number of other recent deaths of young men and women of color, unarmed, not doing anything illegal, who have died at the hands of law enforcement or others. It's not clear to me that things will change. And in fairness, we're not even 12 months removed from it. And these things, for whatever reason, take time. But my fear is that, this may soon be yesterday's news. I mean, to bring about change, we need to get people to change their conduct. And I don't see that happening yet.
Okay, well, we're going to move back over to education. And if people get the Star Tribune, there was an article yesterday, more editorial or letters to the editor today. And actually, I think it was last year that you and Neil Kashkari, the president of the Federal Reserve Bank, were suggesting a change to our constitutional amendment that was written when we formed as a state in 1857. And essentially, when that was written, an adequate education was the word used. And you're suggesting quality education and so some other language change. But could you describe your proposal and speak why you hope that this will be the vehicle that starts moving us to close one of the largest achievement gaps in a state in the U.S.?
Well, let me just begin by saying what this effort is about. The effort to amend Minnesota's Constitution is about justice. And you noted Professor Marshall's comment, never whisper justice. Well, we're not going to whisper justice here. Our current constitutional language provides for an adequate education system. It doesn't even speak to and we haven't over the years focused on children. And so Neil and I have proposed to amend our Constitution to put children first, literally. And I won't read you the language, but essentially what our proposal does is makes education a fundamental right, a civil right for children, gives them a right to a quality public education, not just to an adequate system, but to quality public education that fully prepares them for participation in our community, in our economy, our democracy, and our society. It requires, it would require the measurement for determining outcomes. And by that, I don't mean more standardized tests. I mean, it would, the language requires some measurement tool to determine how well children are being prepared. Unlike what we do today with the testing regimen we have, which is really just a snapshot of where children are on a given day, and it's not used to help individual children. Not, I don't get it. We focus on these tests, but they're really just used as a snapshot to identify failure. They're never, the results don't even get back to the teachers until the students have moved on to another grade. So how crazy is that? But at any rate, the other thing that our proposed amendment would do would be to make it a paramount duty of the state. That is to say, the state would have no higher responsibility than to ensure quality public schools that fulfill a child's fundamental right. No higher duty. This is not about, as some suggest, privatizing public education. It is about ensuring that all children, whether they be Black children or brown children, whether they be urban or rural or suburban, whether they be wealthy or poor, whether they be able or disabled, have a right to be educated to their fullest potential. That's all this is about. And we are hopeful that the legislature will pass it and that the people of Minnesota will get to decide whether they like the constitutional language we have now or something that will ensure a child's right to a quality education. And we hope to have it passed and on the ballot for the people to decide in November of 2022.
Thank you for your work in this area. And I think, there's a lot of different groups, of course. Education is the biggest segment of our state budget, and there's a lot of different groups that are weighing in, but I think you spoke right to the point of this. This is about the kids, and the old African proverb that says, when the elephants wrestle, the grass suffers. And I'm looking forward to seeing how this will work through.
Well, the frustration here is the state's education budget is huge for poor outcomes. Why wouldn't we spend that money for good outcomes? I just don't understand that. One criticism we get, and I would just note that there is this fear, if you will, that courts will become involved. Well, I've been speaking to these issues for 30 or 40 years. We've had 30 or 40 years to fix the system. We haven't fixed it. If a court can come along and say, you have to do X, Y, and Z, and X, Y, and Z fixes the system, I fail to see the problem with that.
Okay, here's we're rapidly running out of time. I want to be respectful of your time. I want to be respectful of our attendees' time. But vast preponderance of the attendees today are Rotarians, and from clubs all across the state down to Mankato and across to Rochester into a little bit of Wisconsin and up north of Forest Lake. So kind of that east Minnesota kind of thing. And so the question I would pose is, what actions can we, and we're about service, that's our whole reason for being, service above self. What actions can we as Rotarians take to address educational equity issues?
Well, you can all get on board and support our proposed amendment, talk to your legislators. But beyond that, spend time in the classroom, talk with children, talk with them about how you got to where you are, how you achieved your hopes and dreams, and what hopes and dreams you have for your futures. And then encourage them to talk about theirs. Talk to them about how, the steps that can be taken. Create that hope. Everybody has the ability to do that. Read to children. Go to schools and read. I've even during this pandemic, I've had the opportunity to read to children across the state. And so there are many ways and many things that we can all do. And while I'm thinking about reading, can I just put in a pitch for Alan and his perfectly pointy and possibly perpendicular pinky, along with the three other children's books that my daughter Cammie and I.
You mean
There's
this one?
Alan's. There you go.
How about this one?
Be Love Can Be Hard. Just recently nominated as a finalist for a Minnesota Book Award. We are so honored. Grandpa Allen's Sugar Shack. I've had the good fortune to be able to co-author those books with my daughter, Cammie, a second grade teacher. Been a lot of fun, been challenging, learned a lot. And so, can also support the Page Education Foundation. And I will note that those 4 children's books, all of the proceeds from their sales go directly to the foundation and support the work that the foundation does. That's why we write them. They're a vehicle to allow us to help the foundation do its work.
So you have kind of stolen a little bit of my thunder.
Sorry about that.
No, not at all. This is my close. So I was on the website a few weeks ago and found these books, all the books on the website. And my wife and I drove over. We scheduled a time because we didn't have enough time to get them in the mail. So we scheduled a time. We drove over to 3rd Street there in Minneapolis, and we talked to a wonderful young woman named Kathy. And we purchased these signed books, all 4 of them. And so my challenge to the Rotarians that are on this call from different clubs, to Justice Page's suggestion about reading to kids, Molly and I are donating these books to the Wildwood Elementary School Library in Montemita. And I already talked to the media center person over there, and she's just excited to get these books. And it's our belief that every child that picks up a book should see him or herself in one of these books. So, but my challenge for Rotarians from different clubs would be purchase a set of these books, connect with your media center, library, elementary school, and donate these books. I don't know how many clubs we've got on here, but we could really amplify the message if we just do this little thing.
Absolutely.
So with that, I have, we've kind of gone a little bit over, and so I apologize to our guests for that. And I apologize to you, Justice Page, if we've taken a little bit more of your time. So much to talk about. And would love to have you back at some point, and we'll keep following the constitutional amendment as it works through the system. And yeah, just on behalf of the White Bear Rotary Club, I want to thank you for speaking to us, taking time to educate us, and I think everybody will say that they've had a great time hearing your words. So thank you for that.
Thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts with you. Appreciate it.